Hello, how's everyone doing? All right, we got our, I assume this is my clicker thing. Yes, okay, cool. So yes, as you know, my wonderful presenter just mentioned, I had a spectacular product failure in 2008 as a product manager. I was fairly early on in my career, and it was so embarrassing. I pissed off 100,000 of Charles Schwab's active trader clients through shipping a chart overlay, and we can talk about that later. But suffice it to say, they were angry. I'd made all of my product decisions based off of a boatload of advanced analytics at that time. And I also had a number of very smart people in the room. So we had very smart engineers, designers, we had financial services subject matter experts, and we had all of these analytics. And I say that because we're in an age where analytics is still king, right? We talk about big data, we talk about all of the things that we do with this data, and yet many of the folks in this room know that data can only give you so much. It's a trailing indicator of what's happened, but it can't tell you why these things have happened, right? So at the time, that failure being embarrassing, having all of these people tell me how much they hated the work that I and my team had done. Barron's writing that up, really thought I was just not cut out to do anything product management or anything tech related. And, it ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me. I just didn't know it in that time. Because what happened after that was, going on this journey of really trying to figure out, where did I go wrong? People tell you, you get a black eye, and you move on. And I thought, well, why did I get that black eye? So eventually, how many of you have seen this journey map? A few of you. So the next step on my journey was to go to a human-centered design agency. This was in 2011. I'd read everything put out there by the folks over at IDEO, anything I could get my hands on, had lots of coffees with anthropology friends, learned about ethnography, did as much as I could on my own as I wandered through the desert to figure out what I needed to do next. And I ended up at Effective UI. And I was very fortunate in that this is one of the early projects that I was involved in. So this is a journey map from 2011. And my approach to these things has changed since then. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that in just a moment. But one of the things that I'd like you to know is that in 2011, coming out of the financial meltdown, if you thought it was hard to sell human-centered design work now, imagine what it would have been like then. When you go to clients and you say, hey, we are going on this journey, we are going to deliver an experience at the end, we're going to charge you X amount of dollars, and we're going to go and observe people. And they say, great, what do we get? And you say, we don't really know. How do you think that went over? So things are getting better. For those of you who are frustrated today, just know the tide is turning. There's a lot more awareness now than there was in 2011. Some very brave clients then, and I'm very grateful for them. And things are getting better. All right, so I'm going to try to make this a little bit participatory. Oftentimes when we're speaking at you, and we're not really sure how well we're engaging or whether things are resonating or not. So I'd like you to just, as we go through some of the activities that come up, it's really voting. If you can raise a hand for things you agree with. If you don't agree with it, either keep your hand down, or if you really disagree with it, make a fist. Sound good? I'm also going to collect a little bit of feedback coming out of this talk. I want to know, how did I do today? Did I meet your goals? Did I stay, on track with the things that you expected me to do? So if you can log into this URL, put in this password, maybe take a picture of it, share it with your neighbor. I'd love to get some feedback. I want to know what went well, or what you got out of this that was valuable, where I could have done better, or where I may have lost or confused you. Good? All right, cool. So, agree, disagree, or whatever. The hardest part of service design is getting the buy-in to do service design. Who agrees with that? All right, a few of you. Others, strong disagree or just don't know yet? Strong disagree? Okay, maybe don't know? Okay. All right. So I've been on this journey, and I am not the kind of person who's done everything right. I have an older sister named Leah. She has done all of the things and won all of the things. I am not that sister, so I have learned everything the hard way, and what I hope to do today is to share with you what I've learned so you don't have to go and suffer through the things that I did in order to get here. How do we get everything that we want? Well, we really have to build bridges to the people, to the teams, to the resources, to the things that are going to help us achieve that outcome. And what I've found personally is that when I can frame what I want in terms of the outcome that I want to achieve, whether that's an initiative at work or whether that's in my personal life, that gets me so much further than just saying, I will be happy when I, reach this number in my salary or this career level or whatever. It's really a lot more meaningful when we can talk about the outcomes that we want, because sometimes when we achieve, the specific unplanned things like the number or the career level, they aren't what we wanted them to be or what we hoped they would be. So that outcome that we want to achieve ends up being a little bit more meaningful. It's really important to define what we want. And so when I was preparing for this talk, I had to get really clear on, how do I articulate what I wanted to achieve when I joined Dell about 2.5 years ago. Dell was coming out of the biggest merger in technology history. And to say that Dell bought EMC is kind of funny because it was a $30 billion company buying a $60 billion company. So that gets into the magic of finance and private equity. It's like little fish eating a huge fish in a pond. It just doesn't quite work that way in the real world. Anyway, what I really wanted when I joined as the UX director for Dell Emc, was to bring together the server, storage, cloud, and other things into a way that made sense for customers. And we knew we had some problems. That's why I'd gotten a phone call. They thought, we don't really know who to talk to, but we know you can do something and maybe help us do a better job of that. And then in addition to that, the thing they didn't know they were getting when they hired me was my own personal goal around enabling a consistent experience around all of those touch points. We'll get into that a little bit later. So again, wanted to bring together the post-merger Dell Technologies offerings in a way that makes sense for prospects and customers. I'm going to start small and start with Dell Emc. There are many brands, many capabilities, many touch points, and many teams within this now $100 billion company. And as you can imagine, that's amazing. There's an incredible amount of complexity, and it's not just laptops. So, to be able to enable that consistent and positive experience across all of those touch points also means dealing with a really complex experience ecosystem. You have sales reps, you have websites, you have phone queues, you have events, you have all of these things, all of these levers with which you can impact the experience. So the challenge is to show up as the same company across all of these different touch points so that somebody has a very good experience at the very beginning when they buy, on through to when they receive things, on through to when they're using them, on through to when they're end-of-lifing and trying to figure out what to do next. In short, this is kind of like trying to turn a cruise ship, right? And so some folks were giving me a hard time last night. They said, well, that's an awfully ambitious title for a talk. But again, it's, there are some things that you can do in order to turn the cruise ship. And the hardest part of turning a cruise ship in a complex environment like Dell is just initiating the turn, because that's really hard. You don't want to turn too fast. Cruise ships are very top heavy. They'll top over. That's pretty bad. So, really, it's not the type of journey that you go on and expect that you're going to get that turn initiated in 6 months. 2.5 years in, finally turning the cruise ship, and I'm pretty excited about where we're going. So how did I start? It doesn't matter what career level I came in at. I've seen some very influential people who are not, at my level, they're junior and they have so much respect, and they're able to get a lot done. And so I would just say, everyone in this room, take that to heart. No matter where you are in your career, there are things you can do to really build an incredible amount of influence. And just so you know, I didn't start in a great place. When I first showed up, coming into an engineering culture that's very obsessed with numbers, I didn't have the qualitative research that I needed. I had absolutely nothing. I couldn't get buy-in to do that research. I actually got laughed out of the room at a few points. They're like, we have data. We have the most advanced analytics capabilities in the world. Like, okay. So getting that support from executives was really challenging. Future self, and to all of you, I would say, be really careful about shaping those expectations about what you are going to need to be successful in your role when you are interviewing and having those conversations about taking that next job. So I went on a journey. In this complex environment, found that there are many different teams out there. I figured somebody somewhere had to have some data, right? Because you're making these products, some people are liking those products, surely there's some sort of research or data behind those products. So I went on a journey. I uncovered about 35 different design teams in the broader organization. I saw the eyebrows go up. I am still finding design teams ever so often. And so I reached out and said, what do we have? As I'm meeting these new teams and saying, here's what I'm looking for. And oftentimes I was hearing, God, I wish we had that. We couldn't get the buy-in to do that. I said, okay, I'll tell you what. Why don't I share anything that I find with you? Oh yeah, that would be great, Deb. We'd love to get that. Like right now, we just have such a hard time. Okay, great. So I went on this journey to look for any of the data or artifacts that already exist, since I couldn't get the buy-in to go and do that stuff myself, at least not at this point. I got kind of lucky because just from my past life, I always make a point to start with the people who talk to customers. And those tend to be sales and they tend to be support. And that can give you some really good nuggets that, in the absence of that generative research that many of us really depend upon, can fill in some gaps and really tell you where things are going wrong. I also wanted to understand stakeholder goals, because if I've learned nothing over the time since my product failure back in 2008, it's that I need to communicate what I'm trying to do in the language of the people who can tell me no, or who will tell me no, so that they will understand why this is important. So went and looked for a number of these artifacts. Also identified the people who shared my goal. Interestingly, it wasn't just other design people who wanted to have this understanding of the customer or bring things together in a way that made sense. Sales, very invested. Marketing, I want to make sure that their messaging is getting through. Support, they would love it if people stopped doing bad things to customers so that they'd call in and make their lives really hard. Really just looking for those other folks. So, quick list here in case you are wondering who you might consider reaching out to in case you're struggling with some of this yourself. All right. It's important to also identify the people who might throw up barriers. And I threw up in big red letters, why? Because in some cases, when you're in an environment, things are such that, you're proposing something that could hurt the thing that somebody else is, graded on. And none of us want to have our paycheck impacted because of somebody else's decisions, right? So it's really important that we understand if folks are throwing up barriers, why it is that they're throwing up barriers. And it's also really important to build that trust, which I'll get into a little bit later. So funny thing, again, going back to sales and support, I had to wonder, I keep seeing this time and again, these teams who have these conversations with customers, it's design, it's sales, it's support. In many cases, they don't tend, they kind of tend to get marginalized in these organizations. And I want you guys to think about that. I think that's really interesting, and I have to wonder if that's about to change. So anything you can do to build a bridge to them, take what they're struggling with, act on what they are hearing, that is going to be a very, very fruitful partnership. With them, you will achieve many of the business goals that you're setting out to achieve. It's also important to know what doesn't exist, so keep a catalog of those gaps. What don't you have that you need to do your job? So in this case, I was really operating without that foundational set of insights or generative data. It comes from having a number of one-on-one interviews with very well-defined types of customers, and then also being able to follow it up with surveys. So I was missing that data. So my next step was to unify. I identified all these people, all of these resources, and this huge appetite to have access to these things that they didn't have. So I brought everyone together into a community of practice, because it seemed like at some point somebody was going to get some budget to do something, and when they did it, I wanted to know about it, and by the way, all these other people who I'd found did too. I really believe a problem shared can be a problem halved. So one thing that you might look into is whether or not a really robust community of practice exists in your organization or in the place where you're struggling to maybe make the impact. In some cases, you might have a proliferation of communities of practice because you start one and everybody else wants to start the community of practice for content and all of these other things. And so that can be fine. In some cases, it's good to have those spaces and those conversations taking place, outside of your general community of practice. But it's good to have buy-in from those folks who might, want to start their own community of practice, that there should be one where we bring together, our stakeholders, the folks who are experience curious, that's what I like to call them. They don't always have to be designers, and have representation from those other communities of practice. And it's so, to make sure that everybody's talking to each other, we know what resources exist, and we can help each other make those collective experience decisions. So, really important note, I know many folks get communities of practice set up, they tend to be limited to designers. One thing that I found early on is when I kept the scope just to designers, there were a number of people who were, really committed to improving the experience. They don't have a design title, but they could be really influential stakeholders, or they might be the types of folks who could help us solve some of our problems. So I would encourage you, if you're, operating a community of practice or setting one up, maybe set your aperture a little bit broader than just design. Include those experience-curious folks. It really makes a difference. Be sure to advocate for your peers and your like-mindeds. In some cases, it's hard coming into a post-merger environment because there's a lot of competition, there's heads rolling, you don't know if you're gonna keep your job or if this person's gonna get your job, there's a lot of uncertainty. And the thing that I would say is what I've seen is if we can work together to show the value of our work, we all keep our jobs. If we can show that we're good team players, that we have good ideas, and that we can collectively do this, this thing, and that we need each other because, good God, there is so much work, there's enough to go around. None of us want to take that on our own. It's really important. Advocate for your peers, advocate for the people who, share that same goal. And the funny thing is, they're going to do it for you too. When you are not in that room to participate in a conversation or something comes up, they're going to say, hey, I think you should talk to Deb. Or I might say, hey, I think you should talk to Jason because he's working on a very similar problem right now. So do what you can, advocate for your peers, try to make sure that you're all watching out for each other. All right, I'm going to have you vote. So agree, disagree, and different. How many of you agree with us? I have all of the money and resources I need to do what I need to do, when and how I need to do it. Okay, we have to talk after this session. I have not really been in an environment like that. So another part of the community of practice, we bring people together across the business. We had some great success where I needed to have a personas study done. Somebody else had a pot of money, and we agreed that actually having a good persona study done was more important than the analytics project that they were trying to sponsor. So even though they were not in my business unit, we teamed up and we were able to get that work done. So again, community of practice, bringing together people who may not be designers, who may have dollars or other things can help you towards your goal. It's huge. So, again, reach out to folks. Sometimes they might have budget when you need budget and can't get it. Maybe they have access to a stakeholder who is very influential and has the potential to either can your project or your initiative or your work. And it can be really good to have that introduction to those other folks. And again, loop you into those conversations. This one was really valuable for me. So I met somebody on the events team, and I found, we put on this huge trade show every year in Vegas, and it's like 4 days long, and it's this like thing to rival ancient Greece in terms of alcohol and other things, and it's in Vegas. So I got an invite, and it was terrific because they said, if you want to talk to customers, why not? It's like, great, I can't get $250,000 to go and do the interviewing or the other stuff that I need, or be able to test these concepts and figure out how our experience is. So I got a seat in their booth, and I was able to run some screening, get some surveys done, have these interviews, loop some other people in from other parts of the organization who didn't report to me to do interviews as well. And it was terrific. We found a nice creative way to get around not having the budget to do the generative research that we needed. In some cases, it's really good to help other folks out of a situation where, because reorgs happen, maybe they end up under somebody who is not good for their career, right? Or just not good for the work that they're trying to do or the goals they're trying to accomplish. So keeping your ears, open for any new roles or opportunities that they could benefit from can be really good. It's part of just maintaining and building that community, having each other's backs. And if you find yourself in this situation, they'll do the same for you. So again, plenty of work for everyone. You do not want to own all of it. There aren't that many of us running around who are really good at our work. Lord knows if there isn't enough resourcing in a company, they tend to bring in consultants. In some cases, there are great consultants. In other cases, there are not good consultants. So really need to help each other out. Make sure that we promote the folks who have the skills, and then also promote the folks who work for those agencies and consultancies who do a good job with the things that they need to do, rather than being suspicious of them. So, funny thing happened recently. I was having actually, this was about 6 months ago. I was having a hard time getting some changes pushed through because for my part of Dell Technologies, we have a marketing team that owns messaging for the products. They own messaging, they own positioning, and they didn't care what we'd heard about from customers. They didn't care about how we'd tested these concepts and found the right way to present these things within these particular pages. And I was able to find a friend over at VMware, and I found that they were actually showcasing our products over there. And the design that they had for that page around that product was suspiciously like the recommendations that I had wanted to push through but couldn't. So I ended up getting some data from them. And it was interesting because the whole goal of all of these marketing efforts typically is to have a conversation with prospective customers, to turn them into customers. And the data doesn't lie. It's either the things you're putting out there that lead to the conversations, they either work or they don't. And so in this case, we found that we had some data for something that did work, that was able to I was able to leverage. It's important as we work with business stakeholders and the people who might say no, that we speak their language. So I've heard many folks say here that in years past, everyone was excited about doing journey maps really well, and now we're starting to mature and look at, how is it that we carry a little bit more influence in these organizations? How is it that we have people listen to what we're trying to say? We have to speak their language. So I don't know if you remember this slide from a little bit ago, but these stakeholder goals. We have this wonderful thing in Dell called a strategy cascade. And that is every leader says what their goal is for the year, and it's this slide. And then the folks under them say, okay, well, this is how we're going, this is what our goals will be to try to enable this thing. Get your hands on that. If that doesn't exist in your organization, you will actually carry quite a bit of cred with your business stakeholders if you say, I think we need a strategy cascade. I know I'm a designer, but why don't we clearly articulate our business goals, and then I'm going to help you guys figure out how to achieve those. They might be shocked, maybe not. So you have to align what you do to their goals. This has been really painful for me because I like to say, stop doing bad things to customers, or this is going to turn into something that's really bad for customers. That doesn't go over well because they're saying, oh, we have these, these numbers and things. So you haven't told me a clear story around how the thing I shouldn't do is going to impact my numbers. So think about what you can do on that front. Have conversations with your business stakeholders. Do they want more sales leads? Do they want to decrease support volumes? Do they want to generate more revenue or sell more? These are things that through the experiences that we enable, especially when they're good, we can grow or decrease all of this. What we do has a tremendous impact on the business. We have to change the language that we use around why we do those things so that the business will care. So bring your best insights, ideas, and attitude. Raise concerns constructively. So I used to say, again, that decision's going to be bad for users. What I have learned is that if I can say something along the lines of, if we take that approach, it will likely increase either the junk leads that go through to sales, or it will increase the calls to support, which means our operating expenditures go up if we try to do this. So How about you help me understand what your ideal outcome is, and I might have some insights or some data. I might be able to help you figure out something. Maybe we can come up with something that isn't quite like this and is going to get you what you need and also not inadvertently impact the business in a way that's negative. Maybe we can even test with users. Like I might take 2 days to knock out some really quick user testing. Maybe there's a way that we accidentally find something that will increase our progress towards our goals beyond what you were hoping to get out of this. This has happened. Another one, in some cases, especially in a company like Deloitte, we work with some really large consulting partners. Designers tend to be very skeptical whenever consultancies or agencies are brought in, and on the side of the consultancy or the agency, in some cases they say, man, we're knocking our knees against the bar that's already been set by this team because the design's so bad. I want everyone to think of this the next time they're tempted to say that. You don't know what that stakeholder environment is. You don't know what they tried to do from a design perspective. You don't know how many times they got kicked in the head, told no, and were unable to do the thing that they needed to do. So, please meet them with empathy if you are coming in from an agency or consultancy. If you are in-house, you have a tremendous opportunity to build some relationships with the folks who are very good, who work at those consultancies and agencies, because what they can do that you may have struggled with is make sure the thing you were struggling to have the business hear is heard and acted on. So really, really important there. Don't knock on the consultancy if they have hired somebody who you really think is not going to do a good job. Really just say, we all want this project to succeed. If it's done well, these incredible things are going to come as outcomes. It could also be a flop. So I'm concerned to make sure that we achieve those outcomes. So why don't we take the time to talk to the resources they're going to put on our project, make sure they have the skill set and a portfolio that backs up what they are saying they can do, because I'm committed to success too. When you go and have that, vetting process and you find that either, this consultancy or agency does not have the resources they say they do, then you've opened up an opportunity to now go and look for the folks who do. And many of us will move from agency to consultancy, to industry. We might move back and forth in-house and out. So it's really important for us to know where we might want to go if we want to go to a consultancy or agency, and also have those good folks to rely on. We get them to care by putting things in numbers. So, in this case, journey map, eyes glazed over. I had to show how many people we were getting and what was coming out of that. So some astonishing numbers. We as designers are afraid of numbers, typically, not everybody. So I would say just embrace very rough order of magnitude. Get some sense of the numbers for the impact for what you're recommending. Business people do this all the time. They don't have 100% confidence in their numbers. I'll just let you know that. So funny thing is, when you can get those numbers, the thing that you were trying to push through that maybe you couldn't get much buy-in around, if you can show that impact, there are people who will care. In this case, the thing that I couldn't get campaigns and marketing to care about was something that sales really cared about. And they were able to push through and get adoption of this pilot even when other folks wanted it canned. So build a bridge to the data scientists and stats geek in your organization. The way that they ask questions is going to make you much better in your own inquiry. You're going to learn a lot, and they can be a really powerful ally. When you speak to executives, if you get that opportunity, and most of you I hope will, answer first. This is something I struggle with because I want to show my math and make sure that, after I've taken them through the math, they draw the same conclusion I did, so I look really smart. They don't have time for that. So try to answer first, and then if they ask questions, then you can show your math. This is something I still struggle with, but I encourage each of you to think about. Otherwise, be brief, be bright, be gone. Find a sponsor. Find someone in the business stakeholder community who you really respect, who has the ear and respect of the other folks you're trying to influence. They will make sure that when you are, reasoning why you are trying to take a particular approach, that you are capturing that articulation in a way that their peers are going to listen to. This is so valuable. Maintain the trust you build. So I'm always there to serve. I'm not good at politics. I don't try to cut people down. I'm not manipulative. I'm kind of the target of people who have a Machiavellian way of being in the world, and that really sucks. But this is my brand. People know they can trust me. They know I'm there to help, and I'm going to do what I can to help them meet those common goals. So, and it takes a large number of people and things to try to orchestrate impact across that experience ecosystem in an organization like Dell. So again, build those bridges, maintain those bridges by operating with a lot of integrity, preserving that trust. And just know your efforts may not pay off in the short term, but good designers tend to be very strategic. So the other thing that comes out of this too is there have been times when I've been pulled into conversations that the people who would tell me no have not been because of the trust that people have for me. So it's really important to be able to be involved in those conversations by maintaining that trust. So don't overserve. I'm rapidly running out of time here. Be sure that you shape and meet expectations appropriately. If you're like me, you're an empath, you hate disappointing people, you want everybody to be successful and nobody to have a bad day. Be sure that you are shaping expectations appropriately. You're setting the right amount of time for things to be done. You're saying when they're going to be done, who's going to do them. That's also good management. All right. Vote. I am really good at office politics, and I am rarely, if ever, blindsided by them. Who would agree with this statement? Hands up. Oh, man. All right, we have to talk afterwards. Be very careful about politics. This has bitten me in the behind so many times. But again, this is part of that whole ethos of I'm there to serve. This allows me to avoid a lot of the nasty things that tend to, snarl people in politics. And then, yeah, you're nodding, and you said you're good at politics, so we're on the same page. Yes. But again, if you can be the person everyone feels is looking out for their interests, not out to get them, at least there to help, you will be included in many things you otherwise wouldn't be. If you are struggling and want some further reading, I highly recommend reading these 3 books. 21 Dirty Tricks at Work. Again, it's the follow-up, but just trust me, get this book. It serves up exactly what is happening in each of those situations where something strange happened and tells you how to deal with it. 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem, if you're trying to figure out how do I know that I am actually operating effectively in the world. This is really great reading. And then Dale Carnegie's classic, it's been in print for 80 years. It's still pretty high on the bestseller list, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's everything you need to know about politics, and then also making sure that you can bring your best, most effective self to work. So feel but don't show. You will find yourself in these situations where you are angry. In some cases, it is because somebody was really unfair and did something really nasty, and that's okay. Acknowledge you feel that way, but be really careful. We as designers tend to have a reputation for being really emotional, and that's not something that tends to go over well when we're trying to get the respect of our business stakeholders. So acknowledge your feelings, do not act on them. So when I feel angry, I will act calm. Meet it with curiosity. Why did they do this? Why are they throwing up these barriers? Why did the project get canned? Don't get angry, just get curious. Because in some cases, you might find that their incentives are misaligned with customer incentives. You might have a really tricky problem where somebody is incentivized in such a way that what you're proposing is actually going to take their paycheck away. Really good for us to understand that, really good for us to bring empathy to it. So, build that bridge. How might we both or all get what we desire out of this situation? Even for the people you don't like. And consider their words too. You will have those people who you just cannot stand. However, in many cases, they will give you the best, most clear, unvarnished assessment of your weaknesses. You don't want to hear it from them, but just, as designers, we're there to really look out for these pearls all the time. So even take this into those uncomfortable situations. So what did I get? Did I get what I wanted? These are the people who had not talked to me, not give me budget to do research, et cetera, when I first started. Here they are in my workshop, all of them. They gave me 2 days of their time. We went through design thinking, and we ended up all getting aligned. We want the same thing. It's a Christmas miracle. And, they're also now a little bit more empathetic towards their peers. They all see that we're aligned towards a common vision. Now we need to help each other out so that we can make sure that this person's actions over here don't take away the paychecks of the person over here, and we all like each other, and we're in this together, and there's plenty of work. And I also got a new boss. This is fun. So now I report to somebody who reports to an SVP who reports to CMO. Like, that's great. It's a little bit easier to get entry into those conversations. But even if this didn't happen, I still have that broad community of people who really like what I'm about, who pull me into those conversations and still want me to contribute my ideas. So I don't know, this is gravy, but not necessarily the thing I cared about. And I just realized, highly unreadable for all of you, black text on blue background, shame on me. So it hasn't been perfect. I haven't been able to yet, affect the entire Dell Technologies experience ecosystem, but I did get what I wanted, and that was turning that stupid cruise ship, enough to actually get us in that direction. Now I have everyone on the same page. They're paying attention to me. I have peers who I adore and trust. We have all of these recipes to bring the soup to nuts way for anybody to have technology together in a way that's going to make sense for them. That's awesome. That's what I cared about. That's what I wanted. That's what I've gotten. And I cannot wait to see what comes next. So one more thing. Just be sure you give me feedback. I want to make sure you got out of this talk what you had hoped to get out of it. If there's anything I can improve, please let me know. Like, seriously, feedback is a gift. Thank you.